Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Making Physical Health and Well-Being Matter for Youth and Young Adults, Education and Prevention. My name is Dana Lang, and I will serve as your moderator today, along with my colleague, Robin Martin. Before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of webinar logistics. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you are currently in listen-only mode. If you are listening on your phone, please enter on your telephone keypad the audio PIN number from the control panel to the right of your screen. You can also send us questions for the speakers at any time during the webinar. Simply type your question into the dialog box to the right side of your screen and send it to the organizer. Depending on your question, I might type an answer back to you or save it for the end during the Q&A portion. We'll answer as many of your questions as time allows. A recording of this webinar and a PDF will also be emailed to you following the webinar with a couple of other additional items. And finally, we'll have an evaluation at the end that we ask you to complete when the webinar is over. And if you have any difficulties during the webinar at any point with technical issues, please call Citrix Tech Support at 888-259-8414. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Crystal Brandau, the Assistant Director of SAMHSA's Program to Achieve Wellness.
Great, thank you so much. I would just like to echo the welcome. We appreciate everyone joining us today for this discussion. We're very excited about it. This is one of the first webinars we've hosted that focuses on youth and young adults. So we're looking forward to the conversation and would just like to remind everyone to please use the chat feature and engage in some conversation and ask some questions to our presenters here today so we can enrich the dialogue. Next slide, please. So before we dive in and I give it back to Dana and Robin, there's just a quick disclaimer here that the views expressed in this training do not necessarily represent the views, policies, and positions of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Youth and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. With that said, once again, we're excited to have this presentation today, and I give it back to Dana and Robin to introduce themselves and get us started.
Thank you, Crystal. As I mentioned before, my name is Dana Lang, and I'm a Senior Project Coordinator at the National Council for Behavioral Health. I work on a diverse portfolio of practice improvement initiatives, including leadership development for behavioral health workforce, addressing health disparities, and adolescent substance use. In addition to having a professional investment in this topic of youth and young adults, the subject matter is also very important to me personally, as I myself am a 20-something young adult and continually seeking out the best ways to keep my physical and mental health a priority. So I'm very excited to learn from our subject matter experts today, and I hope that you'll take away some pertinent information from it as well. And also with me, I have my colleague, Robin Martin, who I'll let introduce herself.
Thanks, Dana. As Dana said, I'm Robin Martin, and I'm a Director of Practice Improvement here at the National Council. My experience is largely in the realm of systemic health reform, leading up to and through the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. I'm currently on projects regarding preventing suicide and researching behavioral health workforce, and this is my second year on the Program to Achieve Wellness. I'm excited to learn more about today's topic from our speakers.
Great, thank you, Robin. At this point, we're now going to move into our speaker presentations. Please note again that we're saving all content-related questions for the end of the presentation, but in the meanwhile, we still encourage you to submit them as we move along. If possible, please try to insert the name of the speaker that you're addressing your question to so we can better keep track of them at the end and ideally address as many as possible in the time that we have remaining. So at this point, I'll turn it over to our first presenter, Linda Henderson-Smith, who is the Director of Children and Trauma-Informed Services here at the National Council.
Thank you, Dana, and good afternoon, everybody. As Dana said, I am Dr. Linda Henderson-Smith. I'm the Director of Children and Trauma-Informed Services here at the National Council for Behavioral Health, where I also have a wide array of projects that I am working on related to both children and trauma-informed services at the organizational level, at the community level, and at the national level. Next slide, please. So let's begin today by defining our population of youth and young adults. So in federal and many state laws, the definition of a child varies. In the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it requires that special education and related services be made available free of charge to every child with a disability between the ages of 3 and 21. The Affordable Care Act requires health insurance plans and insurers that offer dependent coverage to make the coverage available until the adult child reaches the age of 26. Child can also be defined as any individual who is under the age of 18, under the age of 17 when alleged to have committed a delinquent act, under the age of 22 years and in the care of child welfare, under the age of 23 years and eligible for and receiving independent living services through child welfare, or under the age of 21 years who committed an act of delinquency before reaching the age of 17. Now, for the purpose of this webinar, we are going to define youth and young adults to be any individual between the ages of 16 and 29. This population is called many things, so we want to make sure that you understand that when you hear the terms emerging adults, transition age youth and young adults, youth and young adults of transition age, all of these titles reference the same population and can be used and are used interchangeably in the field. Next slide, please. Although the normal course of psychological, physiological, and biological development of young adults has not changed in many years, some of the things that we know is that the world in which we live in has greatly changed. Today's young adults live in a more global and networked world marked by increased knowledge and information transfer, heightened risks, fairly low social mobility, and greater economic inequality. So it's important for us to understand some very important statistics, and we want to really talk to you about some of those. So according to the Federal Interagency Forum on Child and Family Statistics, here are just some key national indicators of well-being that are important for you to understand. One is in 2013, 19% of youth and young adults aged 20 to 24 were neither working nor in school. In 2016, almost half of young adults with serious mental illness did not access any health services. In 2012, 71% of youth and young adults aged 18 to 24 had a usual source of health care. In 2016, almost 40% of the population were obese. And in 2012, the rate of mental illness in youth and young adults was at almost 20% of the population. So why is this important? It's important because what we know is that the leading causes of illness and death among youth and young adults are largely preventable, and health outcomes are frequently both behaviorally mediated and linked to multiple social factors. The first one is family. Adolescents who have, youth and young adults, who have good communication and are bonded with a caring adult are less likely to engage in risky behaviors. Parents who supervise and are involved with their adolescents' activities promote a safe environment for them to explore those opportunities. And the other social factor that's super important is that of school, because what we know is that student health and academic achievement are linked. Healthy students are much more effective learners. And academic success and achievement strongly predicts overall health outcomes. Because, for example, a high school graduation leads to lower rates of health problems and risk of incarceration. Other statistics that I think are really important for us to know and understand as it relates to health outcomes are that unintentional injury, including motor vehicle crashes, are the leading cause of death for youth and young adults for ages 15 to 24, and homicide is the third. And obesity rates have actually tripled since 1970. And each year that a young adult is obese, it increases his or her risk of developing heart disease, diabetes, and other chronic conditions. These are all really important statistics to understand as we are working towards achieving wellness for our youth and young adult population. Next slide. One thing that is extremely important, as I indicated earlier, to the success and the health and wellness of our youth and young adult population is relationships. In addition to familiar relationships, youth and young adults during this time of their life are exploring and entering into romantic relationships, and for some, marriage. Over the past few decades, an increasing number of young adults have been cohabitating with romantic partners in their early 20s and waiting until later for marriage. They may experience or have been experiencing an increased risk of experiencing violence and trauma in those relationships, which may later lead to an increased risk for depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and suicide. Nearly 1 in 3 college women report being in an abusive dating relationship. The other thing that's really important to understand is that the proliferation of social media sites has provided a new avenue for dating abuse, and more than 1 in 4 middle and high school students report being a victim of cyber dating abuse as well. In particular, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, and questioning, also known as LGBTQ youth, are at increased risk of violence and dating violence, and face challenges related to the social stigma of their sexual orientation as well. A disproportionate number of LGBTQ youth experience homelessness each year and are at an increased risk of being driven out of their home by parents. All of these things, especially being able to have at least one healthy relationship, are huge indicators in whether or not someone is able to achieve their health and wellness goals. Next slide. All right. So developmentally, it's important to understand that youth and young adults are interdependent. They're seeking their own identity and independence, while at one point during this age range are also still dependent upon the support of family members, caregivers, and for those that are in services, their service providers. Typical development occurs in 5 main areas during this time: cognitive, moral reasoning, social cognition, sexual orientation and gender identity, and identity formation. All 5 of those areas are extremely hard for any person, but especially for those who don't have the support of their caregivers, their family members, and their service providers. The other thing that's important to note about the transition to adulthood is that this is truly an age, right? An age of identity exploration. Youth and young adults are trying out different options in an attempt to figure out who they are and who they'd like to become, particularly in the areas of love and career. It's also the age of instability, because youth and young adults often find themselves revising their life plan, changing partners, changing jobs, moving and changing residences, and they may also be changing their educational goals along the way. This is also the age of being self-focused, because youth and young adults tend to delay significant adult responsibilities such as marriage and parenthood in an effort to enjoy their freedom, focusing on themselves and on their own needs. It's also the age of feeling in between, because this is the age where youth and young adults consider themselves neither adolescent nor adult. And lastly, it's also the age of possibilities, because many times youth and young adults are optimistic about their future. Next slide. One thing that's important to understand about this population right now, right, the youth and young adults age 16 to 29, is the importance of social media. They grew up with social media. That is what they use to communicate. That is what they use to actually keep in touch and keep connected to each other and to the world. So it plays an important role, and we have to make sure that we utilize that as a tool in working with them towards their wellness. It provides many outlets for social connection, learning, and creativity, and allows for self-directed learning and independence in addition to increased technical skills. Research has shown that 95% of teens either have a computer or computer access, and 81% of teens utilize social media. Most commonly, it's used to extend existing friendships, engage in self-directed learning, and post photos on networking sites. Interestingly, however, since 2006, there has been a noted shift for youth and young adults to favor microblogging, the process of posting short updates to sites such as Twitter, Snapchat, and Facebook, rather than longer blog posts like we used to see back in the day. In addition, using social media sites for connecting and sharing with their peers, teens have also reported using the internet and social media to gain knowledge of health-related information. 84% of young adults use the internet to search for health-related knowledge, including information about fitness and mental health issues. Given the accessibility and utilization of social media sites by youth and young adults, we as providers should consider these avenues when marketing to and communicating with this population. Additionally, the technological savviness of this population may contribute to the attractiveness of newer service provision avenues such as telehealth or chat services, which also may have been increasingly utilized due to accessibility and affordability. Next slide. There are three important issues that influence how the health of youth and young adults should be approached in the coming decade. The youth and young adult population is becoming more ethnically diverse, with rapid increases in the numbers of Latino and Asian American youth and young adults. The growing ethnic diversity will require cultural responsiveness to healthcare needs, as well as sharpened attention to disparate health, academic, and economic outcomes. The mental health of youth and young adults has a profound impact on their physical health, academic achievement, and well-being. About 50% of lifelong mental disorders begin by age 14, and 75% begin by age 24. With suicide being the leading cause of death among this population, and suicide rates climbing significantly for this age group between 1999 and 2014, it's important to understand that trauma is associated with common adverse childhood experiences that contribute to the mental health, physical health, and behavioral health issues that many of the youth have, as well as very negative outcomes as they become adults. The third issue that influences health is the positive youth development. These types of interventions are intentional processes that provide all youth with support, relationships, experiences, resources, and opportunities needed to become competent, thriving adults. Their use is growing for preventing health risk behaviors. And an expanding evidence base demonstrates that well-designed positive youth development interventions can actually lead to positive outcomes, including the prevention of youth and young adult health risk behaviors. So it's important when we're providing any type of service to clients, to youth and young adults, that we as subject matter experts make sure that we are empathetic, assertive, and patient, that we ensure that there's a warm transfer of youth and young adults when they're transferring to different programs. If they're transitioning from the child system to the adult system, we've got to make sure that our programs are actually tailored to them and allow for us to actually transfer them appropriately as well. And then what's really important is making sure that we review our policies and learnings and learn more about the culture of youth and young adults, including their interests, their methods of communication, and their active engagement. How do we engage them? And what best practices can we utilize, like motivational interviewing, can we utilize in order to really gather information from them? Next slide, please. Now, as you are developing practices for the youth and young adult population, one of the major takeaways that we've gotten from policy and many other trainings is that we need to be focused on the fact that they require something different. It's never going to be business as usual. We've got to make sure that the programs and services that we provide are aligned with recovery-oriented principles and should be person-centered, individualized, focused on wellness and respect. But We also have to make sure that we're modifying the way in which we communicate with them, engage them, and talk to them so that we're focusing on resiliency. Because resiliency is the ability to adapt well to stress, adversity, trauma, and tragedy. And with all that's happening right now in our world, it's important if we want our youth and young adults to become healthy adults, that what we do is focus on building their resilience skills, building their ability to actually create relationships, identify the issues, resolve the issues that they may encounter during this time. Trauma-informed refers to having knowledge of the impact of trauma on the people that we serve. Trauma comes in all shapes and forms and can easily be forgotten by any individual, yet the symptoms thereof can be apparent in the decisions that are made, relationships that are formed, and the reactions to those situations. We've got to make sure that we are paying attention and can see the underlying potential needs and symptoms of trauma and can address those with the youth and young adults as well. And then, as I stated, we've got to make sure that we have consistent transition planning and that we're flexible and able to bend. We're not doing things only in the way that we've been used to doing them, but we're able to flex with the individuals that we're working with. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we need to understand about this population is that we have to allow them to identify who their family is. So yes, they all have biological family. They may not have relationships with them, however. And so we've got to accept the fact that their friends may be their family. And those are people that we also need to make sure that we're engaging in our services and in our service provision. If you want people to have healthy lifestyles, engaging the people around them in those decisions and helping them to hold each other accountable, have accountable partners, is going to be one way to make sure that you are youth and young adult friendly. When you say we don't want to talk to your friends can't come around, what winds up happening is you are cutting off their source of communication and relationship. And as I said earlier, relationships, not just familial relationships, but all relationships are important to someone's health and wellness. The other thing that's really important is making sure that your environments are non-stigmatizing. It can be very unsettling for youth and young adults to sit in waiting rooms with other people who are 40 or 50 years old, right, who may show a little more experience of hardships with their life in their lifetime. It can also be unattractive for them, an unattractive expectation to be no more than 5 minutes late to an appointment. So we've got to make sure that we, as providers, are also open and flexible with our clients and allowing them to have an environment that they feel comfortable in. And the best way to do that, to be perfectly honest, is to talk to them. I promise you, they will communicate with you if you ask them. Next slide, please. Now, with all the medical and technological advances that have improved human health and longevity, there are many aspects of the modern lifestyle that are detrimental to our well-being. A healthy lifestyle should be focused on appropriate levels of physical activity, eating real foods, and undertaking activities that promote health, quality sleep, effective stress management, avoiding toxic overload, developing healthy relationships, and feeling a sense of purpose, all of which fall within the 8 dimensions of wellness created by SAMHSA. If someone is considered well, they will have emotional wellness, spiritual wellness, intellectual wellness, physical wellness, environmental wellness, financial wellness, occupational wellness, and social wellness. So health is multifactorial. It isn't just based on one thing, and it doesn't require perfection. What does help is an understanding of the positive changes that can make a difference. So what we're going to talk about really briefly is the 12 pillars that support the pursuit of health by reducing the risk of disease. And again, when we're talking about health, we're not just talking about physical health. We are talking about all of these dimensions of wellness, making sure that people are taking care of their eyes, their teeth, right? All of the things that we need to make sure of. So one of the things in the 12 pillars of support is to follow the sun. There's a master circadian clock, which is regulated by daylight on the eyes and when darkness falls. This circadian rhythm dictates the body's production of hormones such as melatonin, serotonin, and cortisol. So what we need to do is aim to be naturally alert and vibrant on waking up without the use of caffeine. Be energetic during the day and focus on winding down after dark to prepare ourselves for sleep. The second pillar is to live slowly. We should savor the minutes rather than just counting them, and aim for quality over quantity in everything you do, being mindful rather than mindless. Interacting with nature. Evidence shows that physical activity in natural environment is more beneficial than the same activity undertaken indoors. We've got to be sleeping and sleeping deeply. We have to actually encourage the youth and young adults to make sure that they are sleeping at least 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep a night and feeling rested, because what we know is that insufficient sleep has been identified as a public health problem, and it's linked to an increased chance of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and depression. We've got to teach people how to manage stress appropriately, mainly because chronic stress can cause problems such as sleep disruption, irritability, headaches, and digestive tract issues. We've got to avoid toxicity. So tobacco smoke, air pollution, high levels of alcohol, all of those things need to be avoided, because when they are ingested, inhaled, or absorbed through the skin, they can obviously cause serious problems, including an increased risk of heart attack, stroke, osteoporosis, and other diseases. We've got to eat naturally and reduce our reliance on man-made and cultivated foods introduced into the human chain only relatively recently. We all have been told, and we all know, that artificial processed foods, refined sugars, grains, dairy, and intensively farmed produce and consumed meats can actually cause serious medical issues. The next is ensuring that the youth and young adults actually engage with the community. Social isolation is detrimental to health. The number one resilience factor to having people resolve their traumas, many of their depressions, is to have one healthy relationship. It takes one healthy relationship for people to heal their past hurts, and it takes one healthy relationship for youth and young adults to actually change the trajectory of their life. So it's important for them to engage with community and engage with at least one person in order to make those small social networks and make sure that they're not feeling lonely. Other things that are important to actually making sure that people reach their wellness and health is to breathe deeply, live purposefully, move naturally, and play wholeheartedly. We've got to get back to allowing youth and young adults to play and be happy in all that they do. Next slide. I'm going to quickly go through this just because I think it's important. It's important to understand when working with youth and young adults and you're talking about health and wellness that language is important. Language guides behavior and reinforces positives and negatives for that youth and young adult. So make sure that you're utilizing proper language. You're utilizing evidence-based practices and evidence-informed practices like the transition to independence model, the TIP model, and you're encouraging youth and young adults to make their personal choices regarding mental health and physical wellness. You've got to make sure that you empower them to make their own decisions, free from professional judgment. And we have to understand that it is their life and their choice is important, and we have to respect it even if we don't agree with it or like it. Next slide. Lastly, I just want to say, make sure that you practice what you preach. Build on the strengths of that youth and young adult in educating them on resources. Educate them and practice whatever life skills related to health and wellness that you'd like them to continue doing. And coach and guide them in effective and interpersonal and communication skills. Many people, when they come in contact with you, won't really know how to communicate and create those interpersonal relationships. And it's important for you to make sure that they have those if you want them to continue down the track of health and wellness. So Dana, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Linda, for that presentation. And next up, I'm pleased to introduce Taylor Blanco, who comes to us from M.O.V.E. Broward at the South Florida Wellness Network. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you so much, Dana. I'm so excited to be a part of this webinar today. So as Dana had mentioned, I'm the Youth Outreach Coordinator at South Florida Wellness Network, and I'm in charge of a chapter called M.O.V.E. Broward. So I wanted to just start by talking about my story today and how I got into this work. So it's funny because I like to start my story always by describing how I got diagnosed with juvenile diabetes at age 11. That's kind of where things started for me. It was one of those diagnoses that I didn't know much about. I didn't know what was going to come from it, and it was a big challenge for my family and I. And, you know, the doctors kind of explained a few things here and there of, you know, what to expect, but you never really feel like it's going to be you. But actually from that diagnosis, a few months later, going through that age of, you know, not knowing who you are, trying to find yourself, I started to experience some mental health challenges. And from there, you know, my parents, they tried to help me, and of course they sent me to various therapists and things like that to try to, you know, figure out what was going on with me, try to get me to talk to somebody. But at that time, I wasn't really ready for, you know, anything like that, and I wasn't very receptive to these kind of services. And I kind of just started to internalize this diagnosis and really kind of let it overtake a lot of, you know, the way that I would process things and the way that I would think about myself. And from there, I actually developed an eating disorder called diabulimia, which not very many people know about. It's not in the DSM-5, but it's actually where you withhold your insulin, which is what the medicine that I use to control my diabetes. And you withhold it, and when you withhold your insulin, you actually begin to lose weight. So this was something that I had developed, and I also didn't really understand it very much because there wasn't a lot of information on it out there. There wasn't a lot of education on it, and it also really started to worsen a lot of my mental health symptoms that I was experiencing. And it was something that my parents had become aware of, but they still wanted to, you know, push me to go off to college and do, you know, those things that, you know, we're expected to do as a young adult. And so nonetheless, even though I was experiencing these things, I did go off to FSU, Florida State University, and try to pursue a degree. But of course, all those underlying things that hadn't been addressed started to come out in a lot more uglier ways. And I finally came to the decision that I did want to see a psychiatrist and figure out really what was going on. And so I started seeing a psychiatrist there at FSU, and that's where I also received a few more diagnoses. I'm not a fan of labels or diagnoses, but I will share them with you all. So I was diagnosed with depression, I was diagnosed with anxiety, and also having bipolar disorder. And that was very overwhelming for me, being only 18, being away from my family, not understanding, you know, how to cope with these things. I had no coping skills. And I actually had made my first suicide attempt while I was away at college. Thankfully, I'm still here today, and I believe everything happens for a reason. But it was one of those things that I kept a secret and I didn't want to tell anybody about. It was one of those skeletons in my closet for a while. But a part of me knew that it wasn't safe for me to be away from home and to be away from my family and my support system. So I did end up coming back home from there, and thankfully my family is extremely supportive and slowly started to help me, change my life and, embark on the journey of recovery. I actually became introduced to yoga, which that was a huge life changer for me. It was a way for me to, take care of not only my mental health, but my physical health as well. It was a way for me to get my body moving. It was a way for me to connect spiritually, and all those different, pillars that we've talked about that are so important for your well-being. I started to discover those things and start to apply them into my life. And from there, I actually decided that I wanted to be a yoga instructor. So I did get my certification because I wanted to give back this gift that had been given to me. I wanted to share with other people the feelings that I had experienced and help them achieve wellness in their life as well. So I ended up actually doing a yoga class for South Florida Wellness Network, the agency that I work for now. And from there, just becoming linked with everybody, I actually ended up, getting hired as the youth outreach coordinator. And just being here, I've been here for a year now, and there has not been anything that has enriched my recovery process more than actually being involved in this work, and really being able to give back to the community and, figuring out that nothing that happened to me wasn't for no reason. Everything that happened to me, I'm able to now tell my story, and I'm able to make that connection with all the youth and young adults that I serve and work with. So it's been, a nice long journey, but it's been so worth it. Next slide. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about South Florida Wellness Network, the agency that I now work for. We are a nonprofit in South Florida, Broward County. And what's really unique about us is that we are a peer-ran, peer-led agency, meaning that not only myself do I have lived experience, but also all of my colleagues that I work with, we all have a unique life story that we've brought to the table. And it's funny because that's actually one of the requirements to work here is you have to have had some sort of lived experience. So you can't just, be somebody who has a degree, but you got to have those qualifications in life. So it's really great to be able to work with people that, can share their stories. So really what we do is, we work with people who are also in recovery from mental health or any substance use condition. Next slide. So these are just some of the programs that we offer here. So we have Federation of Families Broward, which they actually work with the families who have had experience through their children within mental health or substance use or any of those things. So these are families who may have not had any sort of symptoms or things themselves, but they have lived it through their children or their families. And then there's Youth Move Broward. That is the chapter that I am in charge of. And I will talk to you guys a little bit more in the next slides about that. And then we have our wellness coaches. And our wellness coaches, they use the TIP model in their services. So that is the transition to independence process. And a lot of what they do is, helping you find jobs, find housing, education, supporting them in their needs for transportation, giving them gift cards, to Publix or things like that, where they can meet their very basic needs, because without those basic needs being met, there's no way that we can address any of the other things that are going on, because we know that, there's certain things that someone needs just to even survive. And that's a lot of what the wellness coaches do, helping people with those type of things and also reaching their certain goals that they may have. And then lastly, we have the power of peers. And that is our adult portion of our agency. They do not follow any sort of evidence-based model. They simply just offer peer support, which is just supporting somebody emotionally, just being there for them. And again, they support adults who are in recovery from substance use, mental health, any of those systems, whether they've been incarcerated, just in recovery from life. Next slide. So again, what we do is we offer support to those with mental health and substance use barriers. We also advocate for individuals who are going through the different systems so that they can get the best quality of care for their recovery. And we provide education around wellness so that the people we serve can live healthy lives, meaning that we do offer a variety of trainings free of charge to the community. So we offer trainings like WRAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. We offer WHAM, Whole Health Action Management, mental health first aid, and many other trainings, so people can, really understand what's going on in their lives and how to develop coping skills and wellness tools and all of that stuff. And then we also remove stigma in the community by raising awareness with events, activities, and like I mentioned, trainings. So we do a lot of things in the community to help people, do things for themselves, take care of themselves, because we stress self-care so much, and we want people to know what that looks like. Next slide. So as I mentioned, I was going to talk to you guys a little bit about Youth M.O.V.E. Broward. So the M.O.V.E. stands for Motivating Others Through Voices of Experience. And we actually work with youth ages 14 to 29. I'm actually considered a youth in that case. And it's cool because the youth it's really easy to engage with them because I'm around their same age. So they feel comfortable. And we are youth-led, youth-driven. So everything that we decide to do within our chapter is whatever we want to do. We don't have any outside sources or older adults telling us, this is what you need to do, this is how you're going to manage your wellness. We're the ones that take charge because at the end of the day, we believe that we are our own experts. And so we know what's going to work best for ourselves. So again, what Youth M.O.V.E. Broward is all about is, educating our youth and young adults, empowering them to become advocates in their community, offering them job opportunities, getting them involved in creative projects, different workshops. And we also like to elevate the youth voice, so if they are currently going through any of the systems in Broward County, whether they're receiving behavioral health services, they're in recovery for substance use, or they're in the juvenile justice system, or even child welfare, we like to offer, trainings and talk to them and empower them to speak up and make sure that they're getting the best quality of care within the services that they're currently getting. Next slide. So one of the unique programs that we offer at Youth M.O.V.E. Broward is something called Face the Music. So this is actually a form of creative expression for our youth and young adults. And this is, a chance for them if they're a rapper, if they're a singer, they like to make beats, spoken word, or they're a dancer. They can come to our office every Tuesday from 6 to 9 p.m. And we have so many youth and young adults that come out. And we actually have some individuals from the music industry who come in and provide them coaching. So they help them develop, beats, music, whatever their goals are to, reach out and tell their stories in a unique way. This is, a program that we have for them. And it's really great because what we've come to see is that youth and young adults sometimes have trouble kind of speaking up or, talking about how they're feeling, but it's much easier for them to go through a different process, so maybe rap about it, sing about it, or do a spoken word. We've come to find that a lot of youth have told their stories through that way, and we've learned so much about them through stuff like this. Next slide. And so another really great program that we have as well is called Street Workout 101. And this is a way for, our youth and young adults to maintain their physical health along with their mental health. So it's like creative expression through movement. And it's really great because, it gives youth an opportunity to take care of themselves and maintain their physical health without having any sort of gym membership. So we would go to parks, on the beach, and different locations where they would just have pull-up bars and different things that you can get active with and like I said, not need a gym membership. Learn how to work with other youth as a team, try new things, because we also had a little mix of parkour in there where some youth were learning tricks and learning to do like flips and things on the bars. So it was really cool to see them get out of their element and out of their comfort zone, and just realize what their bodies are truly capable of, and using those skills and those concepts into their own lives, and realizing, well, if I can do this, then I can do anything else in my life. So we've seen a lot of great transformation with youth in this aspect. Next slide. So lastly, what I just want to leave you all with is some of our social media pages. So we do have Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. If you want to check us out, see more of the stuff that we do, stay connected. These are some of the places you can find us. And that is all for me.
Great, Taylor, thank you so much. And finally, we'll move to welcome Melissa Robinson-Grace, who is the Director of Training at the Career Training Institute.
Hi, good afternoon. As she said, I'm Melissa Robinson-Grace. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And yes, I am Director of Training, but I also oversee for my organization a lot of our work around youth and young adults and our drop-in center. Next slide. I work for an organization called Chris 180, and we have been open since 1981. We are in Metro Atlanta, and we serve young people of all ages, but we have a focus on young people, I would say 13 to 30. Next slide. We have a variety of services, but this visual kind of captures the ones where those youth and young adults are mostly supported in. So we have Safe Housing, which is our residential programs, which include group homes for young people in the child welfare and juvenile justice system. And we have permanent supportive housing, which is an apartment complex for young people who have struggled with mental illness. We also offer outreach and support to young people in the community through having housing resources, and we have a drop-in center for young people to come and have a safe place. And lastly, we offer counseling in clinics, in schools, and in the community. Next slide. Part of the beauty of going last is that the people who go before you talk about some of the same work, and that's one confirmation of working with this population. There's a lot of things in common. So what I want to highlight based on our experience as an organization for the past 36 years are most young people don't come to us saying, I want to address my mental health and my health needs. They typically have another need that they are coming to you for, whether that is food, clothing, shelter, whether that is, I want a job, I want to be able to take care of myself, I want to go to school so I can get a good job so I can take care of myself. That's normally what they're coming in the door for. They also often want to talk about interpersonal relationships, and Linda mentioned that before. Family, friends, significant others are very important to young people. And we have to include them in the conversation and even in our service and treatment planning for them. And then once we've taken care of a lot of their basic needs, then they open up more about their mental health and their physical health needs. And what we do is we encourage them to take care of their emotional, behavioral, and physical health and well-being. Next slide. As mentioned before, we also use the TIP model, Transition to Independence process, as the foundation for what we do. And what that model encourages is let's engage youth and young adults in their future, in their goals, in their health. We do that through therapists and life coaches. We intentionally use the language life coaches instead of case managers because case manager can be stigmatizing, and young people will tell you, I'm not a case to be managed, I'm a person. We also, I just thought I'd throw it out there, a lot of our staff that work with youth and young adults tend to be under 30. We do not discriminate, but they are often the ones that are drawn to working with this population. And we want people who understand youth and young adults and understand youth culture. And what we provide to them is therapy, case management, a lot of skill building, a lot of what does it mean to be an adult. So whether that is how do you cook for yourself, or using public transportation, having healthy dating habits, how to keep a job and manage a budget. We do all of those things, but in a way that doesn't feel like work, doesn't feel like school, doesn't feel like therapy, because that can be very unappealing. And we also do activities in the community. How do you have safe and healthy fun? How do you entertain yourself in a way that is healthy and doesn't have to include drugs and alcohol? And we also do awareness events like Mental Health Awareness Month or Suicide Prevention Month, because sometimes young people need to be educated and about health and wellness, and they're going to their friends or the internet or social media for education. And we can be a place to provide education and awareness, and we are, are more comfortable at the information that we're sharing. Next slide. So a lot of our young people come to us, they don't know how to eat healthy. They don't know how to take good care of themselves. Some even say, hey, I want to lose weight. Can you help us with that? It may have been a side effect of a medication, or they never learned healthy eating habits. And since we're helping them adult, this is one of the things we focus on. At our drop-in center, we have a meal every day. Our young people, they help come up with the meals every day. They do the meal planning. We take them grocery shopping with us. So they're learning not only how to make a nutritious meal, but how to budget as well. To help them take care of their health needs, if you look at that middle picture, we partner with Mercy Care, and they have a mobile doctor's office. And that comes to our location twice a month. And young people are able, and the community, they're able to get their health needs taken care of free of charge. We also, to help our young people with their health and their fitness, we have a membership to the Y. We do things like field day. We have personal trainers and yoga instructors come to our location. We've offered self-defense classes, and we even use the Xbox and the Wii to do fitness games like Zumba and Just Dance. So there's many ways to make being healthy more fun and appealing. Next slide. So this first one is a picture of our drop-in center. So when I said before about making it engaging, so having bright colors and it wanting to be a place where young people come, there's a huge TV and we watch movies, but that's where the Xbox is. And so having an environment that is appealing and they want to come. The second picture behind that door is our recording studio. It's a fully functioning recording studio, and it is used for self-expression. Our therapists use it as part of their sessions, and it's a way to learn about the music industry. And the first Friday of every month, we have something called Open Mic Night, and it's a place for self-expression, and our young people can sing, they can rap, they can dance, do spoken word, or even play an instrument. And it's a great time, and we have great turnout every month. And the last picture is a group that was led by one of our peers, the young man in the tank top and the black shorts. He actually helps run the booth in the recording studio, but he also was like, I want to lead a group for my peers about self-expression. And he chose spray paint as the medium, and we had a great turnout, and our young people really liked it because one of their peers came up with the idea, not the staff. Next slide. I know I did go kind of fast, but a lot of the information was already stated before, and I wanted to leave time for questions. So lastly, this is just a little information about our website and some of our services, but I wanted to draw attention to the to the right-hand side this card for the drop-in center. So this is our business card when we do marketing and outreach. This is what we use. And the reason why we do it is we listen to what the youth and young adults said. They're like, I want something that I could fit in my pocket and I don't have to fold. And so that's what we did. And we put a bright color. We have how to reach us. You will see we have we use Instagram because our young people, they don't use Facebook. Our young people use Instagram. So we put that so they can reach us. And on the back, what you don't see is we have our address. We have which bus to take so they can get to us. And it's been a really great resource. And our young people really have responded to having the cards, texting us, and joining with us on social media. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and all of our other speakers for your very engaging and informative presentations. So we only have a few minutes for questions, and I want to try to get to as many as possible, but quickly before that, just wanted to draw your attention to an attachment that's included as a handout to this webinar. It's called Walking for Health, and it outlines the benefits of walking for individuals with serious mental illness. It's not necessarily crafted to be specific for youth, but it does contain beneficial information and strategies that youth could possibly adapt. We're also planning to release several more infographics related to care for youth and young adults specifically that we will email out to all of you soon, in addition to the slide handout and webinar recording. So at this point, we'll move into a couple of the questions that we've had so far. And I believe this first question is tailored to really any of our speakers, wondering if any of the programs that you work on work in collaboration with the juvenile justice system, and if so, how do you separate the two when building trusting relationships with clients, specifically youth? And we can open this to all of the panelists if you'd like to unmute your lines.
This is Melissa. I can speak to that briefly. We do get referrals from the juvenile justice system for all of our programs, and I will especially, what we do up front is we do talk to the juvenile court and probation officers about if our young people think we are going to report back everything they say to you, they may be less open with us. And so sometimes we come to an agreement ahead of time of what we will report on, whether it is, did they show up this day? Did they participate in a group or a skill building class, and less about the content of what we discuss.
Great. Great. We have another question regarding your program, Melissa. How do you pay for the services provided to youth?
We do a mix. So a lot of our funding comes from the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, our state mental health authority, but we also have a mix of some foundation grants, and we bill insurance for a lot of the therapeutic services. We bill that way, or have contracts with some of our funders like juvenile justice.
Great, thank you. And also, Taylor, we had a similar question for you as well. How is your agency funded for youth programs?
So South Florida Wellness Network is actually a nonprofit. So we get a lot of different sources for our funding. We get funded by the county, Broward Behavioral Health Coalition, Children's Services Council. Yeah, we get a lot of different funding from different areas.
Okay, perfect. So in the interest of finishing up on time, we'll wrap up for now. If you have any additional questions, you can feel free to contact me, and I'll put my email address in the chat box. But thank you again so much for joining us today. A reminder that the slide deck will be emailed to all the attendees, along with a certificate of participation, a recording, and the infographics that I mentioned. The webinar recording will also be available on the webinars and newsletters page of SAMHSA's Program to Achieve Wellness website. And then once again, a quick reminder to fill out the post-webinar survey. And with that, we'll sign off. Everybody have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much.